brand new morn on Lebanon, now your hometown.
It is Millsap in the morning on this Wednesday, June 16th, and we're in the Ozark Fiber Studios in downtown Lebanon. Hey, be sure to like and share us on YouTube and on Facebook. Sunny with a high today near 89, so we're going to have a little bit of heat that we've not had over the last few days. Heat index, by the way, around 94. Breezy with a southwest wind, 13 to 23 miles per hour with a gust around 36. It's pretty breezy out there right now. Showers and thunderstorms are likely before 3 a.m., then isolated showers and thunderstorms after 4 a.m., increasing clouds with a low around 66, southwest winds 5 to 15 miles per hour tonight. Gust around 26, a chance of precipitation again tonight around 60%, and new rainfall amounts between a quarter and a half an inch of rain is possible. It's currently 75 degrees. And by the way, I would tell you with the impending weather that may come, stay with Lebanon Now as they'll update you on any pending bad weather headed our way. Today, we start a series of interviews with candidates running for the August primary. Our focus, because we have no contested races for positions in the Laclede County Courthouse, will be on races for the state Senate and for the House of Representatives and the Missouri General Assembly. We will also focus on some coverage on the proposed amendments on the August ballot, specifically Amendment 5, which would gradually do away with the Missouri income tax. Scott Fitzpatrick, who is the state auditor, will join us sometime next week, and we'll have an interview with him. We'll start our coverage with former state representative Hannah Kelly, who's running for state Senate seat currently held by Justin Brown, who's term limited out. Next week, State Representative Bill Hardwick, who's also running for the Senate, will be here. On July 3rd, we're going to take a little break from the politics and have Taylor Howe here. We'll be back with Taylor, as we will be talking about the 4th of July celebrations are going on that week here in Lebanon, and we're going to talk about the founding fathers of our country and celebrate those who signed the Declaration of Independence. And, of course, Taylor's quite the historian if you've joined us in the past when he's been on the show. And we'll talk about some of the quirky personalities that were in the Continental Congress. I guess we can talk about quirky personalities in the state assembly as well, yeah. So we will pick up our political discussions on July 8th when State Representative Don Mayhew comes to Millsap in the morning. He's also running for the Senate seat in District 16 that encompasses Laclede County. On July 22nd, Royce Tucker's running for state representative in the 142nd District, will be our guest, and our political interviews will finally end on July 29th when Dr. Jeff Brown comes to the show. Don't forget, we'll have live election coverage right here on Lebanon Now as Taylor Howe will join me for local election coverage. You can only get that right here on Lebanon Now on August 4th. We'll have a talk with Hannah Kelly when we come back right after this on Millsap in the Morning.
I'm Jeremy Goforth.
And I'm Holly Goforth, and we're with Legacy Homes. So this house sits in Legacy Trails. This is a 68-acre subdivision that sits right next to Ashley Park. Approximately 127 lots that we will be building on. What's unique about this subdivision is that we're connecting Ashley Park's trails into our subdivision that will go through our subdivision and connect back to the park.
The Legacy Trails, we have all kinds of homes. The minimum is 1,500 square foot, high efficiency, new construction homes. If you're interested in this house or any other home in Legacy Trails, we have 10 house plans available. Contact Legacy Homes at
417-718-1962 or 417-718-2051, and don't forget to look us up on Facebook.
Here in Lebanon, we believe local matters, and that includes your internet, by the way. Ozark Fiber is a Missouri-based company bringing high-speed fiber internet to our community. That means faster speeds, reliable connections, and support from people who actually live and work right here. Experience the difference with Ozark Fiber. Check your availability at ozarkfiber.com. Hannah Kelly is our guest on Millsap in the Morning. You probably don't remember the first time we met. We were both running for office.
That's
and we were at the Pet Breeders Convention here in Lebanon in 2016, and we had a booth next to one another, and that's where we met. And You were.
I had forgot about that, but
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, we were the
Yeah.
only two candidates there. You were running for state representative, and I was running for sheriff. And
Yep.
we sit there all day, right next to each other. That seems a long time ago now, almost a little over 10 years ago.
A lot of waters went under the bridge.
Yes, it has. So you're running for the state senate to return to Jefferson City after being term limited out in the House. Tell us who Hannah Kelly is.
I'm a mom. I'm Aunt Hannah to a lot of little people. I own a business with my sister in Mountain Grove on the square. We're very easy to find right there. Real estate company. I've been in real estate for 20 years. I've negotiated on behalf of people's biggest life decisions since the beginning of my career. And it's a huge part of what drove me to run in 2016. I realized that my generation was feeling very, very disconnected. I was feeling disconnected, and I knew that I could do something about it, and I could help bridge a gap and help to speak truth where I didn't feel like it was being spoken, and make sure that people feel heard. And I basically got asked twice. The first time I told the person that asked me, which was my uncle who had served previously, I said, I don't think I want to do that. Nope, I'm busy doing my thing. And then the next time he said, Hannah, I can't get this out of my mind. I think that you could make a difference here. And I said, you know what? I'll pray about it. Well, you know what happens when you pray about things and stop trying to control the decision. And I just knew in my heart I had to at least try. And so we won by 45 votes in that election. I'll never forget that night because I had walked outside to cut and paste the "Sorry We Lost" speech that I had written. My campaign helper said, why don't you go sit at a restaurant the day of the election and write a "Sorry We Lost" and "Yay We Won." That way there's, well, not a bad idea, right? And I literally walked outside and I was going to cut and paste that onto my Facebook. And all of a sudden my big crazy family came pouring out of the house and my phone started ringing and we won.
And if I recall correctly, you beat somebody, and I can remember, and I have a lot of connections in Wright County, and I've talked about that over the years, but a lot of people surprised. Number one, you were very young at the time
Yes.
that you got elected. How old were you?
Yes, 26, I believe. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
And you beat a person that was well known in Wright County, a
Yes.
former educator, an agriculture teacher.
Yes.
And you pulled off that victory. And obviously, you had some background in this simply because your uncle had served in the House.
Yes, my grandfather served as well in the early 80s. And, people always have opinions, and I welcome those opinions always. But anybody who knows me, when I told my mom I wanted to run, she said, what? Because nobody would have ever expected, I wouldn't have expected that I would be someone who would seek that because, it was just something I hadn't planned on. But sometimes I think the older you get, the more you find that's where life's best surprises lie. And it's became a deep passion of mine to make sure, the other day I was talking to some kids in their 20s and they hadn't registered to vote. And before I left, they had everybody gathered around the computer and they were working on the Secretary of State's website, printing off the form, and to me, those moments are what it's all a huge part of what it's all about, because that's our next generation of leaders and we got to get them engaged.
Now, 10 years later, you're wanting to return to the state General Assembly as a state senator. What's the difference between Hannah Kelly 10 years ago running for state rep and now Hannah Kelly running for state senate?
That's a really good question.
That's why I asked it.
You're good at this. And I want to make sure that I don't, let's see, the biggest difference, there's some differences. And I would say the number one difference is that with age comes experience. Serving in the House for 8 years teaches you good things. And then you also see things that are unfortunate. And for me, the biggest difference would be I'm already preparing in faith to win, because I remember when I got elected the first time, I'm like, where's the bathroom? What have I done? I was moving into my office, just in jeans and boots, carrying everything up. And this lady goes, ma'am, which school group are you with? And I was like, I wouldn't answer for a little bit. And she says, well, who are you with? what are you doing? And I said, well, I just got elected. And she's like, oh, and her whole tone changed and all this stuff, which was what was and still is awkward. But the biggest difference is I don't have to look for the bathroom on day one, right? And the biggest difference policy-wise is I have seen the product result of what sometimes can be well-intentioned efforts gone awry. And I have seen work that I have been a part of in the budget committee in the House to know what we can then in turn now as we are facing some very serious budget days ahead that you and I were talking about before we went live. I can take the budget experience from the House and apply what we've experienced to the Senate, because the Senate is where the work gets finished. We all know this. The House begins things, the Senate finishes. And the budget focus is my number one focus, because when I was elected the first time, I had a lot of ideas. I had a whole passel of them. But what 8 years has taught me is you have to follow the money. You have to understand where it's going, and you have to understand what is being done with it and what our outcome is to make sure that the citizen gets the very, very best outcome at the end of the day, which is what we should all be about regardless of party.
I want to go back to something that you talked about, the fact that you got elected at a very young age, serving in the House. And then in your last term, you were chairwoman of the House Ethics Committee.
Yes.
And you investigated the Republican Speaker, Dean Plocher, who's no longer in the House, and he had a failed attempt as a Republican nomination for Secretary of State. The final report was a 7-2 vote that was dismissed. High-profile event. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you really took a position that the Speaker had obstructed the investigation, though that was not the final finding of the committee, I don't believe. That had to be tough. You'd been in the House for a little bit, but there had to be political pressure regarding that and your stance in dealing with taking on basically the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
What was your takeaways from that, and what did you learn about yourself and learn about your colleagues as you drove that investigation?
As I drove that investigation, then and now, the biggest thing that prioritizes for me in recollection of that would be the reoccurring responsibility over the years that I saw as a state House member, no matter the situation, and now seeking to serve as your senator. The people who have no voice deserve to be heard. The people who, if you don't show up to the table, don't get their issue heard, don't get the concern heard, don't have someone advocating on their behalf. If you don't show up, truth doesn't get brought to light. And to answer your question, whether it's the ethics committee or in the House or hopefully in the Senate, sometimes it's not the grand outcome, but it's what you stop. And that is probably my biggest takeaway from that. People, you're basically proverbial head of HR when you're head of ethics, right? In a way, that's a boiled down way to explain that.
Probably in my vernacular, you're the head of internal affairs.
Yes, correct.
Which is never a popular position a lot of times.
No, sir.
So that leads me to the question of that as you move into the Senate, or you're wanting to move into the Senate, will there be residual effects to that, in your ability to deal with colleagues that were there during that period that probably didn't agree with you?
I don't think so at all. I really value that question, because that question deserves to be answered. Not at all. No. I had issues that come with being a leader and making the tough decisions. You know this from your years in service. You sometimes are tasked with making decisions, and you have information on this side of your desk that other people don't have. And you have to have the courage to be able to say, we're going to go this way because I know it's right. And the responsibility that I have as a leader is to build the trust to be able to accomplish the job. And so during that time, there was a lot of tension, there was a lot of feelings, and there was a lot of opinions. I have worked since that day to make sure that anyone, as I do with any issue where I find myself maybe on opposite ends of an issue with anyone, I believe negotiating is in my blood. I've sat at tables like this my whole adult life, 20 years now. And that is not something I worry about at all. Because I could tell you names, but out of respect to privacy, I won't you to like, oh, Hannah had a beef with them or they had a beef with Hannah. No, I don't want to go that road. But what I will say, I could give you multiple people who would say, yes, during that time, Hannah really upset me, and for the most part that I know about, that's not an issue at all. And if anyone does still have an issue from that season, my response to that is that they have the right to have an issue. That is, I absolutely respect their right to still have hurt feelings over that. That I did my job. And so I understand and am passionate now more than ever of making sure, again, that the right things happen for people in government and that the things that need to be stopped are stopped. And I believe and know that I did that with that task in front of me and will continue to do that if given the opportunity to serve as senator.
Hannah Kelly is our guest here on Millsap in the Morning. We have more right after this.
Wake up with Millsap in the morning. From the brick on commercial to old 66. He's got the people, the news, and the mix. The voice of the town.
Hurt in a wreck, facing charges, denied disability. Called Deputy Mizell's. Missouri lawyers dedicated to justice and results, over 70 years of experience in personal injury, criminal defense, workman's compensation, and Social Security disability. From auto accidents and wrongful death to DWI, drug charges, and denied disability claims, their team fights to protect your rights and get you the results you deserve. Offices in Lebanon and Camden, fighting for clients across the Ozarks. Free consultation, day, evening, or weekend. Call 877-532-2191. 877-532-2191. Millsap in the Morning, and we're with Hannah Kelly, who is running for state Senate. She used to be a state representative, state Senate in District 16, and she's on the ballot this week, or last week actually. Missouri State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick issued a warning about general revenue spending in the budget that the legislature passed in May. He also issued that warning earlier prior to the budget actually coming out. He says the budget has a potential of a $625 million shortfall from the $50.7 billion budget that was sent to the governor. I think it was today or maybe yesterday the governor comes out and agrees that Fitzpatrick's thought that Missouri is facing some financial issues. And part of that is getting back to 2019 money, to where you don't have the COVID money that came in from the federal government, but also during your time in the state legislature, there were a number of tax cuts, and including an exemption from income on capital gains, profits from sale of assets. During that last session, the capital gains tax was estimated at $11 million annually when passed, actually cut the state tax receipts by more than $500 million. Now, both of us are Republicans, and there's no secret to that for the folks that listen and watch this show, where my stance is. We all like tax cuts. I certainly like the capital gains idea of cutting that. But at some point, there has to be a revenue stream, or there has to be cuts in the budget. Now, Missouri faces in August a ballot amendment to amend the Constitution that would do away gradually the income tax. Number one, how are you going to pay for things? Number two is, what's your view on cuts to the budget, and where do you start cutting?
So number one has got to be the absolute priority, which flips back to what you asked me about. What are you doing going forward? What's your direction? Budget is my direction if given the chance to serve as your senator. And the reason is because you got to follow the money. Then you know what you can do, right? The example I will give you is what we previously talked about with the tax credit reform that we did right after I was elected. Scott Fitzpatrick was actually our budget chair at that point in time. And I had just been appointed to the budget committee and was just getting my feet wet with the enormous conversation about tax credits. When you look at that money, that is always a good place to start because, I don't care what you look at in any budget. There's always good and there's always bad. Right. And especially with what I believe is a $54 billion budget this year.
50.7.
It's something
billion,
in there. Yeah. Which too much. We can all agree. But at the same time, we have to take a basic business approach that I'm sure is taken here, that's taken at the tables of every family in the 16th district. And that is, okay, looking at the budget, we have responsibilities. We've got to make sure the grocery bill's paid. We've got to make sure the utility bill's paid. We've got to make sure that the gas is in the car and that the trash service is paid for. Like that stuff has to be done no matter what. So I unequivocally take common sense approach to the state budget and look at what the unequivocal things are. For me, a huge part of that, of course, is our elderly, making sure that the folks sitting in our nursing homes are taken care of, making sure that those who are in our foster care system get the help they need. That's a huge issue. I know you've had Melissa on different times. You've probably heard about this, but an example that I will give you that is not cutting the budget, but I call it a reallocation of priorities. We were taking $8 million a year from foster children who had lost both their parents, who had benefits. That is money the state shouldn't be taking. But on the flip side of that, we also have a lot of waste combined with the contracts that take care of these kids. And that is a whole conversation that we could sit here and talk about till tomorrow morning. But you look, you do what every family has to do across this district. You do what every business has to do, and you look at every contract. You look at every outcome of every contract, and you make sure that the people, such as our foster population, such as the elderly, such as the families who need help. Here in Missouri, we're about giving a hand up, not a handout. And so we have certain services that we need to make sure are there and are available. And I'll give you another example. We have a constitutional responsibility to make sure that our schools are funded. We need to make sure that with that funding, we are not we are not ignoring waste there. We need to look into that and make sure that the money is getting to classrooms. We need to make sure that teachers are getting what they need to be empowered to teach our children who are the next workforce. We need to make sure that, a huge issue that comes into play here is the conversation of our small town pharmacies and the money, the big money that's wrapped into the cost of your prescriptions. I was talking to a lady yesterday and she said, Hannah, my prescriptions about eat me out of house and home. And there's layered reasons and whole separate conversations as to why we're at where we're at and all these things. But with the budget, I've always called the budget the spine of the state. And you have to be willing to do the dirty work. You have to be willing to put your mud boots on and walk through the field, not around it. And that's what I'm prepared to do on day one, and make the hard decisions, make the tough decisions, again, to stop what needs to be stopped and push forward what needs to be pushed forward. And in this situation, we have a serious responsibility of making sure that people that need the priority services that exist here at the table are taken care of.
Amendment 5 is obviously become very controversial, and you see a lot of advertising done on both sides now.
Yes.
And a lot of misinformation that's probably out there, probably from both sides. But one of the issues that you cannot get away from is that those that are paying income tax, that's a dwindling number of people.
That is correct.
And correct me again if I'm wrong, but Missouri seniors... and that now is a lot of people, a lot of retired people. My generation of baby boomers, 2 years ago, retiring at $4 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. And we didn't produce the same amount of children that past generations have. So there's a dwindling population as well. But they're not paying income tax on Social Security. Mm-hmm. They're not paying income tax on certain retirements. Now you pay, I think, Social Security on a 401k or a 457 is, but those that have a a state pension, those that have a railroad pension, whatever it may be.
Right.
You don't pay that sales tax on that. So part of Amendment 5 is to address that dwindling number of people that are actually paying. 25% of the state population is on Medicare. And so, or Medicaid, I guess, would be 25% of the population. What's your thoughts about Amendment 5? I'm not asking you to come out one way or the other, but there are certain things in it that make sense. The other side of that, and this is another argument I think of Amendment 5, is that I don't know if it passes. And I think the idea of sending it to the taxpayers or to voters is a good idea, but it goes back to the legislature, and then you decide where the sales tax are going to go. And I don't know what that's going to be.
I told you right before we went live, I believe one of my biggest tasks right now is to be ready day one with common sense solutions. I'm working behind the scenes with my team to make sure that if trusted to serve, we're ready to go with the conversations to make sure that the guardrails, I believe in guardrails. I believe in clear paths. When I'm negotiating a house contract, we have to have where we want to be, and we have to make the two meet. Right. And it really is that simple. We need to have clear communication. If I'm your senator, I'm going to be talking a lot about where we're at, where I believe it needs to go. And hey, guys, give me input if it passes. But to be ready to go on day one of session and say, hey, let's make sure that we are not thinking of only certain groups, but that we're thinking of every affected group with what will then presumably be, if passed, a restructuring of much of the tax code.
Real quick, and I want to talk, there's a lot of talk about property tax reform. That kind of got shoved to the side. Where are you at on that?
So, to be very transparent, I have not read the piece on Amendment 5 that deals with property tax reform. Is that what you're asking me about?
No, in fact, there was a bill that was going to be introduced, died in committee, that would have dealt with property tax.
Yes.
There's been a lot of discussion about reforming property tax in the state of Missouri.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you where I'm at. I can't speak to the bill that died, and I think there is a piece about property tax reform in what's going to the ballot in Amendment 5, but I can't quote that right now. Yeah. So I'll tell you where I'm at. I am working a plan right now that would have it where and we're not quite done with all of the language, but what it would do is it would say, if you, Mr. Millsap, have stayed in your home for 10 years, that your property tax would fall off, okay? As well as the fact that if you went and bought a new home, then the clock would restart, okay? Statistically speaking, in the state of Missouri, there is a rollover of home ownership every 6.2 years as of 2022. That number has increased in recent years due to the interest rate and just saying higher cost of living that people are dealing with. Okay. They do expect that number to fall a little bit as we move forward. These are all projections, of course, but the goal is incentivization to stay in your home. The goal is to also protect the income revenue and to not, how do you bite an apple one bite at a time? You don't eat the whole thing. We want to gauge where we're at step by step and make sure that we can still, again, take care of the responsibilities adequately. And so that's where I'm at. I'm working on what the jot and tittle part of that plan looks like, right? But I do believe it's absolutely achievable, because here's the deal. If you stay in your home 12 years, what are you doing? You're replacing a roof. You're replacing heating and air. You're spending money on that home. You're spending money, presumably, in the community. But again, only about it's right over 50% of homeowners are primary homeowners. And so with that, I have a neighbor that has 800 acres. She lives in Texas. She's still paying the taxes on her property in this proposal of mine. As an example of how that would work. Investment of property, of course, would continue at the normal rates, as we know. The goal here is to provide relief, and the goal is to better understand where the dollars are going. When you pull the reins back, you slow down a little bit, and you give accountability to everybody at the table, then the people get the best product out on the street. And that's always the direction I want to go, especially if given the chance to serve as your senator.
Anna Kelly's our guest on Millsap in the Morning. We wrap it up when we come back right after this.
Scott's Event Rentals. 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 2066. He's got the people, the news, and the mix.
Back on Millsap in the morning, Hannah Kelly is our guest. She's running for the state senate in District 16. One of the things that I do want to talk to you about when we talk about revenue sources,
Yes.
and you've come out very strongly against this regarding video gambling machines that are in
Yes.
convenience stores. A lot of people say gas stations. And that is different than your two other opponents. Bill Hardwick has introduced legislation about having those legal.
Yes.
I think Mayhew has come out kind of neutral in those, but you have been very vocal about maintaining them as illegal, even though they are a resource for revenue.
Yes.
So my question is for you to explain that, especially since now that we have the lottery in the state of Missouri and have for probably close now, way over 30 years. We also have now sports betting in this state. What's the difference and why not use that revenue?
Great question. I understand your concern of the revenue. Here's my why. I served as Children and Families Chairman for, I believe, 7 years in the House. I saw firsthand on my side of the desk the statistics, as well as being a House Budget Committee member, the money that we have to spend on the reality of the fact that when families struggle, when families face addiction, when families face breakdown, when the state has to step in because there's nobody there for various reasons that more often than not, unfortunately, include the reality of addiction. We're paying for that. We're paying for that big. And I don't have those numbers here in front of me, but here's what I can tell you on my size 10 feet is the fact that I am not willing to go down the road of saying this is going to fix any problem in exchange for expanding the population that we are going to have to be in charge of by default. I have friends who go gamble on those machines and they give me a hard time, and they do it in fun and there's no issue. But it's just like any other conversation in this genre. There'll be people that have issues and there will be people that don't. And at the end of the day, we currently have a legalized form of gambling that you've mentioned, the variety of forms. And I have no convincing facts in front of me to persuade me that expanding what we have and expanding our depth of responsibility for what we legalize is a good idea, because it takes all we have right now to manage what we have legalized. And what you legalize, you take responsibility for. And so again, from my position as budget chairman, pardon me.
Oh, you've already given yourself a promotion there.
I'm telling you what, as I was a PROPS chairman for Children and Families, as well as Children's and Families chairman, and our kids are our future, and we can say that or we can live it out. And I know the waste in the budget that we have talked about, and we could have a whole show on where to find the waste, right? But I'm telling you, I was quoted in the paper, so I'll just say it here. Saying that this fixes our budget woes is like saying it's okay to send your child to the street to pay your light bill. It's not okay. It's not okay. And we know what needs to be done. And we're Missourians and we understand hard decisions, and we got a lot of them in front of us. And for me, this decision is right, and we will find the money other places.
You talk about government waste, and I want to wrap it up with a couple of questions. But when you bring up the idea of government waste, and I was a big fan of the idea of DOGE in the federal government.
Yes.
Now, I don't know it was implemented correctly or had its own guardrails that it needed. Would you be in favor of a committee or a state board to look at government spending and waste?
100%. I'm going to tell you why. I think one of the greatest services to the citizens of this state is when people who work for the state are incentivized to spend thousands of dollars or they won't get it back the next year. Our government employees should be encouraged for returning money to the till. When you send your grandkid out with $100 and he or she brings back 30, it's like, great. You're not going to punish him for that. That doesn't make you mad. Why are we doing that with our employees of the state? Why are we encouraging? Because that is your dollar. That is his dollar. That's everybody listening's dollar. And we're saying, go spend it, go spend it, go spend it. Because if you don't spend it, we need to have a serious conversation about how we handle the consequence of whether you spend it all or not. Because I think that if we change how we work that conversation at the state level, which can be done from the Senate, I believe, with the right kind of conversations and the right kind of relationships at the table, which I know I can help facilitate. But it's the simple things, it's the details, and it's the relationships built. And again, I think that's a big part of it. Is if you've got, you have 5 different departments that are no longer punished for sending back X amount of dollars, the story becomes a lot better in my mind.
And for those that don't know, and having spent 42 years in the government, and we didn't do this at the sheriff's office in Laclede County, but they're, especially in municipal budgeting when I was at Springfield, and ahead of a budget, whether it was in criminal investigations or traffic or special investigations, whatever, training, whatever I was assigned to at the time and in charge of, that you were encouraged, don't have money left over at the end of the year, spend it.
Yeah.
And that becomes frivolous, and we see that at the state level, and that's what you're talking about there.
Yes.
So the people that you're running against, all Republicans in this primary, you will have a Democrat opponent through November. Typically, most Republicans believe in all the same thing.
Yes.
What separates you from Don Mayhew and Bill Hardwick?
I would say the gambling issue that we're talking about, as well as just the simple fact that I understand the struggles of a generation that must be challenged to lead. And it is my deep passion to make sure through our actions rather than our words that they step up, and they do that by seeing us give the right example and lead with courage. And I'm prepared to do that.
I'm going to give you the last word. Anything else you want to tell the folks?
I need your vote on August 4th.
That is Hannah Kelly. She is running for State Senate in District 16, which includes Laclede County. Well, you have joined us for our very first of the political interviews that we'll do throughout the month of July as we head up to the August 4th primary here in Missouri. Join us next week right here on Lebanon Now, and join Lebanon Now for all of their program. Until then, I'm David Millsap. So long, everybody.
He's got